This is Dr. Jean, dear future people. Today, I'm going to talk about overpopulation, which was a big issue in 2023. And then I'm going to introduce you to hell. Well, do we need birth control, killing fetuses or infants, war or disease, maybe some synthetic artificial viruses, to prevent or control overpopulation? In 2023, this was actually a question. So first of all, let's define this. Too many individuals in a constricted space makes it impossible to sustain healthy living. Okay, so we are not talking about living as a human. We are talking about healthy living as a human. So we need to realize that sufficient territory is necessary for health. And many people in 2023 simply just did not realize this. Megalopolis, urbanization, concentrated food production with high yields, improved transportation systems, these things make it possible to live in a dense urban area with concentrated commerce and services. Okay? But there's a price to be paid for this. There's not enough territory. So there's not enough air, there's too much noise, there's too rapid change, and too much concentrated variety. Now remember that we said that reality, at least organic reality, has variability as one of its main attributes. Okay? So variety is very good. But if you make variety artificially compact, then that's going to have its consequences. So variety and change are natural. Okay, everything is in constant flux, and that is natural. But if they are overwhelmingly dense, artificially dense, then these things can overload the nervous system. And because they overload the nervous system, they create stress. So overstimulated, flashy, spotty mind function arises with restlessness, confusion, depression, heart disease, kidney disease, and substance abuse. Not to mention abnormal relationships between people and a lost sense of identity and community. Over-specialization is also a big problem because due to competition, it prevents harmonious, well-rounded development. So this is going to be very important because over-specialization will create problems with identity. Okay? If you are not well-rounded, then you feel that you are like a cogwheel in a machine. So you are not going to be an organic part of nature or an organic part of community, a well-rounded, harmonious being, but one little point in a multitude of points. And that immediately tells you that some of our problems that we are always talking about, in other words, relative uniformity, okay, and mechanical extension is related to this. Okay, you have adequate food, which is wonderful, although these foods need to be highly preserved with a lot of preservatives, not to mention coloring agents and all kinds of other issues. Why? Because you are far away from the food source, right? So if you are far away from the food source, then preservatives are necessary, okay? And so to compensate for the lack of natural, organic, fresh foods, you have all kinds of artificial colorings, artificial seasonings, and whatnot. Okay? So, like you are lacking well rounded harmonious development, you are also lacking natural food. So, it's a question of both mental health and physical health. Over specialization means that you delegate out most of your core functions. Okay, and with that, you are going to get into a situation where you decrease local uniqueness. Why? Because everything is done in a standard way, right? And look at here. What do you see? You see a multitude of near uniform entities, here cars. But this just symbolizes what happens to people also. There's this tendency toward uniformity, okay? And yes, you have immediate changes and all kinds of variety because you have all kinds of people coming together, okay? But they are all going to melt and artificially melt into a uniform development, okay? And that's going to be a problem. Now, city streets and public spaces may be beautiful, but they do not compensate for the unique cultivation of a local environment. So when you have your own space, it's the same as with your mind. You have your own space. So you express yourself by cultivating that space, be it a garden or a home or whatever. All right? So you decide what kind of flowers you are going to cultivate here. You decide what kind of home you are going to have uniquely according to your own style, and you express yourself in it. When you are in an urban environment, you are much more constricted. Your self-expression may still be there, but it's going to be more difficult. And that is exactly the problem with overpopulation. That overpopulation largely means concentrated urban population boom. So let's look. You see, here is the historical years, and you see that there is an exponential growth about right around here. Okay, and now if you are going to separate out rural population growth versus urban population growth, then you are going to see that most of the population growth actually has been urban. So there is a disproportionate growth of the urban population with respect to the rural population. Okay. So whenever you see disproportionate growth, and you think about what we have been talking about a lot, about multitude of relatively uniform cells, it will ring a bell, right? So what are we talking about? Overpopulation beyond just numbers. There's an uneven distribution, rapid change, lack of territory, overloaded minds with all kinds of information, leads to decrease of local uniqueness, less self-expression, less sense of local community. So there is homogeneity, standardization, coordination, which are the prerequisites of empire. So you will immediately see that you have these building blocks of empire ideologies and all kinds of standardization, mechanical standardization. Confusion will then arise due to poorly processed information. So, yeah, you have variety because somebody came from here and the other person came from there, but you cannot really process all this overwhelming variety because it came all of a sudden, right? So you have to adjust to this and this and this and that, all of that at the same time. So there's a tendency to kind of compensate for this too much variety. There's a compensation of trying to find a common ground, which is oversimplified. Okay, so there's an oversimplified uniformity, mechanical standards. So you have mass communication, you have news, you have ideas spreading, but inadequate adaptation is the problem. So you compensate with pushing standards. You see, that is a problem because you need time for adaptation. You need time to understand deeply what it means that all of a sudden you are going to live with this type of person and that type of person and that type of person. And that time is rarely allowed to you. So this is not multicultural cross-fertilization of minds. This is inadequate digestion, suboptimal processing, resulting in confusion, depression, and ultimately manifesting in somatic disease. You see, stress-related diseases are not because there are people who cannot cope with stress. Yeah, there is that side also. But it is also because you are in an urban environment which is very highly artificial, okay? And you need to adapt to these things. And you have all kinds of information, and you are not given adequate time to digest this situation, and then you're going to have a problem. And that applies also if you are born in that particular environment. So you're used to that environment from birth, because we are talking about a community level problem, okay? So the whole community needs, at the community level, needs to digest that all of a sudden you don't have adequate space, and you have too much noise, you have all kinds of things that you don't fully understand, and oversimplification and standardization are taken to the extreme to compensate for these problems. However, when you think about overpopulation, when you think about urbanization, please understand that you are not talking about problems only at the individual level, not even at the community level, but you are talking about a more general problem. And in this problem, and this is a very basic and fundamental point here, okay? It's not about humans only, right? If you thought that, then you were a cancer cell. But it's not about humans only. It's about the whole ecosystem. And the whole ecosystem is gonna adapt, right? So we live in a complex system with the inherent ability to compensate. And we are not in the driver's seat here. Yes, we can influence this, and we should. But this is not about us. This is about a whole complex system of the community of living, of the whole planet, and the whole universe, and the whole of reality. Okay? So, you may think that you are leading this, like you are manipulating a machine and directing its function, but you're not. a part of this, an important part, only a part. So overpopulation of humans, excessive urbanization will be checked by adaptation by the natural environment. Temperature rise, pandemics arise, and all kinds of changes are going to arise that will react to this problem. Okay? It's the same thing when you have too many of these animals, those insects, those plants. Then there will be a natural reaction to that. And that's beyond our control. We can help it, but that's largely beyond our control because this is not a human level problem. It's a larger problem than that. So overpopulation of humans, what is the solution? Surely it's extraterrestrial colonization, which means that we take the human species to other planets and we make standard, uniform, homogeneous things everywhere else, like a cancer growth, right? We are going to extend ourselves and bring what is here to there mechanically without adaptation, sure. No, that's not what's going to happen. It's never going to happen. It's a dream, and it's not a very beautiful dream either. This is not going to happen. Now, in 2023, people believe in such things, okay? And this gives them consolation. But no. So, what is the solution for the overpopulation problem, the urbanization problem? Well, you need to understand that local uniqueness and harmonious development is a must. Okay? And these things cannot be sacrificed for numbers, gains, and competition. Mechanistic thinking with linear extrapolation will never work on the long run. Yeah, on the short run, yes, you can do it. I mean, you can make a curve look like a line. But on the long run, the line and the curve will just diverge, right? And you may have inferences, but then something will happen, and these inferences will generally turn out to be only valid for a short period of time. On the long run, no. Current trends continue for a short while, not a long time. So we need to understand that overpopulation of humans is a transient problem. And that since there is impermanence because things change, this transient problem will be resolved. Okay? But it's a higher problem than what we can resolve. We are not going to resolve it. The entire ecosystem, the planet, the natural environment is going to resolve it. All what we can do is to understand that exponential growth in mathematics can be sustained, but in real life it cannot be sustained. Exponential growth will provoke a reaction, and that reaction cannot be in any way mitigated or stopped. Balance will be eventually regained, a fundamental property of any complex system. So overpopulation, excessive urbanization will have its solution, but it's not going to be our solution because it's not the level of problem that we can drive. The ecosystem is complex and you cannot control or dominate it. In fact, it is an illusion. It's an illusion of thinking about nature as a machine that you can, drive or regulate. No, it's too complex for that. So when you, and here I come back to the point that we raised earlier, that whenever you have a uniform multitude, okay, then you immediately think about cancer cells, because cancer cells are relatively uniform and they produce an exponential growth. And the cancer cells producing exponential growth will, like a parasite, simply exhaust the potential for that particular host. The host is going to die and transform into a new being, right? So what can we do? We need to realize that we cannot be cancer cells, that parasitism is not sustainable in the long run. So we need to understand that humans need to be organic, an organic integral part of a complex system, and that is the only solution. So this is not sustainable, okay? This is an idea of following an oversimplified ideal, an oversimplified and uniform goal, and this is not sustainable. It may be a dream, but it's not a nice dream. This is much more sustainable. And this is all you can do, right? Try to be an organic, integral part of nature, of an organic reality. And then everything will fall into place. Because if you do not give up this integral organic relationship, it's not going to be exponential growth. There's not going to be cancer development. It's going to be a more natural life. But for that, one has to cultivate the mind locally and uniquely, right? And have that as a condition that makes life worth living. Without that, what do we have? Without that, what we have is hell. So let us talk about hell. Well, in Vitologia, hell is a state of mental inertia, okay? So the organic relationship between mind and reality depends on mental cultivation. And that mental cultivation needs to be local, right? Unique. If you don't have that, if you neglect it, if you neglect cultivating your mind uniquely, then this is what you're going to have. So let's describe it. But imagine a crystal, like an ice crystal or diamond or whatever crystal, okay? So what you see is that you have a crystal lattice, which is perfectly linear and regular and symmetrical, okay? Now imagine a crystal that is composed of clocks and measuring rods, okay? And now imagine a world that can be simplified into a model like that. So in other words, a crystal or an imaginary crystal with measuring rods and clocks, okay, which are perfectly uniform. This is, it's a good didactic model, but it's an oversimplified model with uniformity, with mechanical extension, and this is going to be the model for a mentally inert mind. Physical sciences look at reality as if it was a cadaver, a dead body, that one can freeze and then dissect with a knife, okay? Because, you know, if you have no life in a body, then that body is going to be more mechanical, right? There's no reaction to the knife. You can do with the knife whatever you want to, right? Because it's a dead body. So natural sciences, physics, chemistry, even biology, they look at a physical universe like that, like it was a cadaver. And so even in the intellectual, the more figurative space, they introduce categories and measures. Okay, categories and measures in physics, for example, manifest themselves as temperature, mass, energy, and these things then will have universal fixed relationships. Like in a cadaver, you have a universal fixed relationship between, you know, blood vessels and the organs they are supplying. Okay, and you have states as snapshots. And since you are used to dissecting a cadaver, you're perfectly happy with snapshots. Okay, so you know, you imagine the world as if it was frozen in time. You ignore processes, you ignore changes, and everything will look like a cadaver that you can dissect. Okay, you have fixed relationship. Okay, here's an artery, here is the liver. This is the hepatic artery, and it goes this way and this way and that way. Okay, so you have mechanic permanent relationships that you then extend in time, and so you imagine that those relationships are absolute. So in physical sciences, since these relationships are fixed, for example, between temperature, pressure, or whatever, then when you actually measure things, you sometimes see that there's a fluctuation of your results, and you introduce the idea of error. So if your ideal result does not match your actual result, then between ideal and actual, there's going to be what? An error. So what you're going to say is that there is an ideal thing, okay? And so your actual result is not the same as the ideal because of this or that or that or that error. Error in your measuring instrument, or you know, some kind of influence that is not supposed to be there. Okay. Now, the problem is this, that there is a transition or very fine gradual change over a long time period that you're not going to notice because you simply attribute it to error. Okay, so you assume that there's no transition, there's no very fine gradual change because things are permanent, right? This is the cadaver mentality. You believe that there are fixed relationships and that those fixed relationships are there forever. You see how crazy that sounds? And yet, believe me, in 2023, people actually believe in this. You see? So they assume without a question that an experiment showing something here actually reveals something that is permanent and fixed for all eternity. Of course, it's not like that. So your error, okay, is not going to explain what is happening because your error would make any sense at all if you assumed that there are these ideal, fixed, permanent relationships. That's not what you see in real life. So, what do you call these fixed, permanent relationships? You call them natural laws. What a crazy idea. And yet it seems to work. Why? Because laws, I mean real laws, exported from jurisprudence, okay? They seem to work. I mean, you need some kind of laws or rules so that you can cooperate with your fellow humans, right? And so, if it works in jurisprudence, then it should also work in nature. So, if there are laws regulating humans living and working together, should be laws in nature too, right? Right. Of course, it's a silly idea, yet it is universally accepted in 2023. Don't believe it, because it's like that. So there are natural laws, and they do not change. They are permanent, and they are absolute. And people believe in this, and they worship science. Science that is based on this idea. Imagine that. So, if the law does not seem to apply, then laws. Okay? Okay? To explain the difference between your ideal, okay, and your actual measurement. All right? So you have problems with mechanics, and then you introduce quantum mechanics to interpret to explain those differences. Okay, so and you are going to say, okay, then in very small scales, mechanical laws are going to be a little bit different. Okay, so you introduce new laws, and you never think for a minute that your original law was just an appearance, that you concluded from a small number of observations. Why is this? Why is this? Well, it's very simple. Because people's mindset is such that they always generalize and they mechanically extend. So if they come to a new situation in an extended domain, then instead of modifying their laws, they maintain their law, they just add another law. Because it's easier that way, supposedly. And then they are going to have, they have to pay the price for that. So the point is that experiments are a small number. Your observations are a small number. So if you take a snapshot, you will, of course, understand something, but you don't know how permanent or how universal that something is going to be. And if you regard your observations as absolute and objective, then you are going to have these artificial extensions. And you will have to make more and more and more and more laws to compensate for your errors that are going to be bigger and bigger and bigger the more you know. And then at some point, there comes Vitologia, which is going to tell you that your laws are oversimplifications. And they are absolute because they were mechanically extended, right? And so you need to review your tendency to make these absolute laws, these permanent absolute truths coming from spotty observations. So local uniqueness. While the world, the reality is in constant change, it's organic. Okay, so everything should have a domain. And it's not just an error. No, it's not an error. because you would have error only if you had an ideal absolute result that should be permanent and that does not depend on circumstances, that there is no such thing. So let's see physical sciences. You have a multitude with random distribution. Like, for example, here you have a person with this shape and this height and this weight, and then this, and then this, and then that. And then you are going to say, okay, well, in this group of people, the average height is this, the average weight is this, the average body composition is this, okay? And then you make an imaginary ideal, an average. But that average, although it describes something vague about a snapshot view of that population, okay, that average is imaginary. Okay, it's an artificial human concept. Here is the normal distribution, which is one possible distribution of any value, like, for example, height or weight or body composition or, form or shape or whatever, okay? And then you think that this is some kind of an ideal. No, it's not an ideal. It's an imaginary average, okay? And this is not error saying that, okay, you should all be like this, and you deviate this much, so you are this good. You deviate this much, so you are this good, because you deviate from the ideal, which is the average. How crazy that sounds. And yet, this is what people believe in. That there is an ideal height. There's an ideal weight. There is an ideal average, which is an imaginary, human, artificial concept. So, diffusion of gas particles. We already alluded to that in the previous video. There's a set of gas particles which form a multitude. So there are near identical members. But are these particles uniform? Is there such a thing as an ideal gas particle? Are they really separate? So in other words, they are separate beings which only from this point or that point of view would be attached and influence each other. No, no, it's not like that. It's just that it's the illusion of the ants and the stars. That if you simplify things, then they look the same. All ants seem to be the same. All stars seem to be the same at first look, right? So the gas particles also looking like they are the same, when you simplify things. So you have this spotty reality of, I made this experiment, so I saw this relationship, and I extended this to this law. And then there's this observation, this experiment with this kind of relationship. And then these spots you put together and fill in the gaps with mechanical extrapolation. So statistics, it's important to realize, okay, come from probability theory. And probability theory arose originally from making sense of results of games, like that. And then statistics are used, its domain is extended to making sense of experiments. If you repeat your experiments, you're trying to see what your outcomes are going to be like. What is the likelihood of a certain outcome? Okay, so this is the origin of statistics right here. And statistics is very good in this. Statistics is not very good here. It's a simplistic extension from here to there. And so, if you mechanically extend this even further without thinking, because you are mentally inert and you are not engaged in matrix thinking, like when you think things through deeply, and this is what's going to happen. You have an ideal average, okay? An ideal average. And of course, it's important to understand that this ideal average is established based on few criteria, right? So this is important, okay, like a variable, like a measure. And then this one or two or three measures, one or two or three aspects are going to be absolute. You only concentrate on this. You create an average. You create an ideal thing based on two or three, aspects, and then you make up an ideal for everything. Okay, so you have an ideal person now. Eugenics. You see, it's all based on the thinking that an average and an ideal are the same, and everything else is an error. See how far this goes? And it all comes from mechanic extrapolation, which is compensation for lack of knowledge, lack of thinking, and ultimately the result of mental inertia. Mathematics plus jurisprudence artificially put together creates the idea of equality. Okay? So yes, 5 equals 2 plus 3 in the realm of mathematics, because 2 plus 3 and 5 are the same thing expressed differently. But in real life, it's not like that. Because 5 is an imaginary category. The numbers, quantitation is an imaginary category, okay? With imaginary members, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with imaginary averages, and creating imaginary notions, ideas, okay? Variety is natural. So in nature, there is no such thing as 5 or 2 plus 3. Okay? There's nothing like that. Equality is artificial because numbers are artificial. Okay? Yeah. This plus this are 2 fruits, yes, but fruits are a category. Okay? This is not the same as this. 1 plus 1, 1 is the same as 1. That's in mathematics. In nature, 1 fruit is like this, and 1 fruit is like this, and 1 human is like this, and 1 human is like this. And they are not equal. I mean, they might be equal from a certain point of view, but the deeper you think, the more you understand that you need to consider a lot of angles, a lot of aspects, lots of points of views. Okay, and then all of a sudden you will see that this is not the same as this. So these are not 2 fruits. This is 1 particular orange and 1 particular apple. And not even less than that, but that would lead us too far. Okay? So there are differences. Okay? And mathematics can only be applied if you ignore everything else except 1 particular simplified category. So again, the absolute sovereign entity, the human individual striving to be perfect and happy and approximating an ideal standard. Okay, so this is what we worship, the ideal human individual. And we want to be like that, an ideal human individual. This is sovereign above us, and we think that this is an absolute thing. Individual equality, individual freedom, individual happiness, individual rights, individual responsibility, individual will, and individual salvation, everything individual. And this individual creates the individual ego, the self-centeredness of an illusion of a separate entity. A separate entity that is like a gas particle, okay? It's uniform and ideal. And because it's uniform and ideal, it is absolute and permanent. A community of separate, near-uniform individuals with equal rights, equal needs, equal desires, equal opportunities. So yes, there's diversity. Diversity of what? Diversity of height, diversity of color. But otherwise, basically and fundamentally, everything is the same, right? So this is hell. This is 2023, okay? Where there are ideals and averages are the same, and everything else is an error. So natural diversity, true diversity, is not taken into account except as an error. So these are useful but artificial concepts. Yeah, it should be good for didactic purposes, and these should be good for beginners, okay? But if you fail in your development and you don't cultivate your mind, then you are stuck here. And then you believe in statistics, and then you believe in extending experiments into natural laws, permanent relationships, and absolutes and ideal entities, categories. Okay? So, are these separable, equal entities? Or are these a complex system? Mother and fetus, mother or father and the child, people working together, people living together, or a family. These are organic communities. They are not separate individuals. They are not composed of ideal members with error. No, no, no. They are complex systems. Complex systems with organic, important parts that make up that system. Okay? And these parts are also unique. They are not ideal plus error. No, they are naturally diverse. Hence, variety, which is a basic and fundamental property of an organic reality. Okay? So now that you saw hell leading to wars, leading to viral infections that are artificially created, leading to all kinds of horrible ideas, mechanically extended, creating competition and war, now you see what hell is. Hell is not far away. Hell is here. And hell is due to mental inertia. With that, I thank you for your attention, and goodbye for now.